feels like everything's changing really fast. Technology's changing really fast, the laws are changing really fast, and it's almost impossible to keep up. I'm a privacy professional, and I spend a lot of time hanging out with other privacy professionals, and we spend a lot of time talking about what is the future of this profession. And there's a lot of debate right now, but there is one thing that everybody does seem to agree on, and that is that our profession needs to evolve. My name's Reid, and I'm the founder of the Privacy Pro, and I want to share with you a model that I've developed for talking about this. It's called the data ethics ecosystem. To start a conversation about the data ethics ecosystem, we have to start by talking about data ethics. As far as I know, there's not a universally accepted and clear, concise definition, but when I talk about it, I'm talking about privacy, AI governance, and data protection. I'm looking at the way that data interacts with other disciplines like human rights, indigenous sovereignty, and consumer protection. And I'm thinking about the way that data impacts things like sustainability, justice, inclusion, equity, and freedom. So, if this definition is close enough to your definition, then I'd like to invite you to explore a new model for talking about and thinking about our roles. Where should we start? Well, we should start with people. People are the reason why we're all here. They are the reason why we chose this profession in the first place. When we think about people, we're often very focused on individuals, and that makes sense in our space because that's how laws and regulations are written. They're couched in human rights law, and that focuses on individual rights. Increasingly, we've started to acknowledge that we have to think about individuals in the context of the communities that they are members of. Individuals are members of multiple communities, and taking into account intersectionality is very important as we think about data ethics. Privacy and data protection have not historically spent a lot of time thinking about broader societal impacts, but we do see that in the world of AI and conversations around AI ethics and AI governance. Let's not forget to bring environment into the conversation, and I don't think we do that enough. We have to think about the environmental impact of the way that we're using data. So when I talk about people, I'm talking about all those things: individuals, communities, society, and the environment. People are at the center of the data ethics ecosystem because data ethics is about protecting people. And not just protecting people from harm, but protecting people's interests, their rights and freedoms, protecting their prosperity as well. We do that with rules. In our space, we focus a lot on laws and regulations, on the formal, written down, official rules. But let's remember where laws and regulations came from. Laws and regulations were developed and implemented to codify sociocultural norms. And these are very contextual and much harder to define. Sociocultural norms vary between generations, between cultures, between countries, and we have to keep that in mind when we think about laws and regulations. Those of us who work within organizations spend a lot of time thinking about the organizational policies. Policies are designed to protect the interest of organizations, and that might mean managing risk, complying with laws and regulations, or furthering that organization's objectives. And finally, the fourth type of rule is a technical measure. Now, a technical measure is a type of rule because it is designed to force or block something. A technical measure could be cutting-edge technology, but it could also be as simple as just the ability to turn a device off. This is a simple graphic that is designed to show the relationships between four different types of rules. It is a perfectly symmetrical, two-dimensional diagram. But ecosystems are not static or symmetrical, and they certainly aren't simple. As people, we are all at the center of the data ethics ecosystem. As data ethics professionals, we also have a special relationship with these rules. I've identified 8 archetypes to describe our relationships with those rules. Let's start with researchers. Researchers could be students or professors in an academic setting. They could be technical experts. They could be journalists or authors. Their role is to understand the rules, and the rules being the socio-cultural norms and the technical measures that make up the cultural, historical, and practical context that we're thinking about data ethics. Another data ethics archetype is the advocate. The advocate seeks to influence the rules. An advocate could be advocating on behalf of individuals or communities. They could be advocating on behalf of companies or industries. Advocates seek to influence the rules, and they do that through their interactions with policymakers. Policymakers could be legislators, adjudicators, the people who we have entrusted to bridge those sociocultural norms with the laws and regulations. Policymakers make the rules. Those rules are enforced by regulators. Regulators in the context of data ethics could be data protection authorities. You also see data ethics regulators in other spaces, like consumer protection or health and safety. Researchers, advocates, policymakers, and regulators exist outside of an organization. They don't make decisions that directly impact the way that data is used, but they make decisions that impact people. Within the organization, there are 4 archetypes as well. And these archetypes do make decisions and have a direct impact on the way that data is used, and therefore a direct impact on people. Let's start with the lawyer. The lawyer interprets the rules. They have a deep knowledge of the laws and regulations, and they translate those into organizational policies that are going to protect the interest of the organization within the bounds of laws and regulations. The privacy officer is often a lawyer. But remember, here we're talking about archetypes and the roles that they play. The privacy officer's relationship is with the organizational policies. They implement them and they govern them in order to advance the organization's objectives. You might not be familiar with the term privacy architect yet, but if you've worked in an organization, then you definitely know someone who fits this archetype. The privacy architect bridges the gap between the outcome, which is compliance with those policies, and the inputs, which is the implementation of the technical measures. The final archetype within organizations is the engineer, and the engineer is the one who actually writes the code and configures the system to protect the data. This data ethics ecosystem is starting to look complicated because it is complicated. We've talked about the 4 archetypes that exist outside of organizations and impact people through their relationships to the rules, even though they may not be making decisions that directly influence the processing of personal information. We've talked about the 4 archetypes within organizations and how they work together and their relationships with the 4 different types of rules. But the picture's not complete because we still have to talk about the roles that support these different types of data ethics professionals. Starting with the advisors. Advisors are law firms, consulting firms, and others who exist to give an outside perspective. They support any of the 8 different types of architects, and one of the benefits that they bring is to be an expert in a certain subject matter area so that not everybody has to go deep on every single topic. Then we have the teachers, the educators who are supporting these different data ethics professionals by giving the technical skills that they need in order to do their jobs. Technologists are software companies, other tech vendors who are there to make it possible to do our jobs in a way that is scalable and demonstrable. And finally, we have the connectors, the people who bring us together, virtually and in person, to share ideas, collaborate, and get to know each other's perspectives. As a data ethics professional, I'm sure you see yourself on this diagram, and likely in more than one place. After all, most of us don't fit neatly into one box. I'm sure you also see your friends, the people that you admire and aspire to be. And you probably see the people who frustrate you or put a thorn in your side. That's the whole point. I made this to help us navigate the important conversations and visualize the way that we all fit together, the way that we all work toward that common goal of protecting people. An ecosystem needs to be in balance, and for that to happen, we all have to have a seat at the table. And so I hope to see you around the table at some point soon and continue this conversation.